Hey guys, welcome to another fun, exciting episode of Music with Mr. T. Today we're going to be combining what we've learned about the treble clef and the bass clef to learn about something called the grand staff. The grand staff. Now, what is the grand staff? Like I just said, it is us combining the treble and the bass clefs together to put them all into one big major grand staff. The grand staff looks like this, and it is what we use as we talk about playing on the piano or the organ or any instrument that you would use your two hands for. So some instruments that we have that use the grand staff include the piano, the organ, the harpsichord. Now, we're talking about the grand staff because it leads us into a second part of discussion about reading music, a second part in the discussion about reading music. We've talked about the bass clef, spaces and lines. We've talked about the treble clef, spaces and lines. But there are also some spaces now on this grand staff and lines on this grand staff as well that are above and below those staves. There's spots that are above and below those staves, and we call those ledger lines. We call those ledger lines. So what we're going to do is do a quick review of our treble and bass clef lines and spaces using a grand staff, and from there we will go into talking about ledger lines, how to read ledger lines, and review our musical ABCs. Before we go, did you know that short sleeve hoodies were a thing? Right? This is so awesome. All right, let's get started. All right, here it is. Here is our grand staff. We see our treble clef right here for our high notes. We see our bass clef here for our low notes, and they're combined by this solid bar line here, as well as this bracket, connecting them all together, giving us our grand staff. Now, let's take a look and review our different parts of our treble clef. We know that this first space is F, followed by A, C, and E. And we know that our lines are E, G, B, D, and F. All right. Now, taking a look at our bass clef, these spaces, A, C, E, and G, all cows eat grass, and our lines, G, B, D, F, and A. Good burritos don't fall apart, because if the burrito is made right, it shouldn't fall apart. All right, so now that we have that, our right hand is going to be playing notes up here in the treble clef. Our left hand is going to be playing notes down here in the bass clef. But sometimes there are going to be some notes that fall above, in the middle, or below the staff. They're going to fall above, below, or in the middle of that staff. So, what should we start with first? We're going to start first with middle C. Middle C is going to lie right here, sort of. I'll give you a better image of that. But middle C is going to lie right there because it is in the middle of the staff, and it is also in the middle of the piano, in the middle of the staff and in the middle of the piano. C here is, of course, a line note. So if we think about our musical ABCs, A, B, C, that's right, D, the next note above it would be the note D. There's the note D there. Also, looking at the treble clef, we know that this top line here is an F, and the letter after F in our musical alphabet is going to be G. So that next space up is the note G. And then following that, we always start back over with A on the next line. So that gives us an A. Then the next space above that is a B. And then when we add 2 ledger lines, we have a high C. Same thing happens when we go down to our bass clef. We know that this top line here is an A, so the next space above it will be a B. And then, of course, our middle C, even though it's already there, I'll draw it again right there for you. And we can also do the same thing if we go below the staff of the bass clef. We know this bottom line here is a G, so then below that we will have an F. On the next line, we'll have an E. Below that, we have a D. And then, let's try it over here. And then with 2 lines, that gives us a C. So there's ledger lines above and below the staff because there are, fun fact, 88 keys on the piano. 88 keys on the piano. So now that we've looked at how this looks at on the staff as we draw it and write it out, we're going to put up a graphic of the grand staff, and then we're going to practice reading some ledger lines. All right, let's take a look at this worksheet now that is going to help us practice some ledger line and how we read those ledger lines. I will include a link to the description below for how to access this file on Teachers Pay Teachers by a wonderful music educator. So let's go ahead and get working on identifying some ledger lines. All right, looking first here at the treble clef. So we know this is the treble clef. We're going to label it as the treble clef. And we know E, G, B, D, F. So the next space would be G. The next line would be A. All right, we know our bottom line is E. Going backwards in our musical alphabet, we have a D. Going forward, we know the top line is F. One note or one letter up is the note G. All right, these next ones are going to make us work extra hard. We know this bottom line is E. Next space below is D. And the next line is that middle C. Then the line below that would be B. 2 ledger lines below the treble clef is the note A. Moving forward, we again know this top line is F. The space is G. This line is A. The next space is B. And 2 ledger lines above gives us a high C. Keeping on going, we already know that this first line here is a C. Let's keep going up the alphabet. Next space would be D. Next line, E. So this next space up here would be a high F. And one more in the treble clef. We know this is middle C. Going down B. Next line, A. Next space, G. Next one, F. And below that gives us our low E. Okay, let's move up and take a look at a couple of bass clef ones. We always know that this line here is going to be middle C. Keeping on, we know this bottom line here is G. Oh, move my hand. Bottom line there is G. Then we have an F. So going down, that would be E. Okay. Next, we know middle C is right here. Then up D, then E. That makes that our high F in the bass clef. Oops, I also forgot to label my bass clef, so I'm going to circle it and label it as my bass clef. All right, let's keep going. We know the bottom line here is G. Going down one gives us that F. Keeping moving forward, we're looking for this space note, so we're going to count the lines first. Good burritos don't fall apart. After that A, we get a B. We've already established that this line is E, so let's keep going down. Next space D, next double line C, and then below that is space B. One more. Let's start right here. We know this is a C. Next space D, next line E, F, G, A, B, and C. Now this C here that we see in the bass clef is just for practice purposes because you're most likely going to have that in the treble clef because of where it is located on the piano. The idea of us using ledger lines is just to get some extra spaces and lines below the staff, but sometimes we just want to use these different ways as different methods of practice. In real music, you probably won't see this third space C here because that's a lot of ledger lines to read at a quick, fast pace. But this is just for us to be able to practice that. So, before we end this practice, I want to talk about a couple of notes on ledger lines that you should just remember as quick practice. When we think about learning music, a lot of times there are some things that we must just remember as quick practice, just like your fast facts in math. 2 times 4 is 8. Things like that, like we remember those quickly. So in the treble clef, we're always going to know that this line above is going to be A. 2 lines above the treble clef is always going to be C. That's something you should remember just right off the bat. Same thing if we look at the bass clef, 2 lines below the bass clef, we're going to have a C. And those kind of things, or those kind of tricks can help you remember and understand, or recall rather, where those notes are in the ledger line so you can identify them quickly and read them quickly as you are sight reading on your instrument. This applies not only to you as a piano player, but any instrument you're using that you're reading the notes on the staff. It's really good to not only remember your lines and spaces in treble and bass clef, but to also remember where some of those ledger lines are so you're not having to count ledger lines every single time. As we take a closer look at the grand staff and ledger lines, we're going to go to this website. I'll put the link in the description below as well as here in the video. And what we're going to be looking at is how we are solving the problem and why ledger lines were created. So we know that there are 2 staves, which is plural for staff, treble and bass clef. There's notes on the spaces and on the lines that we already know. The problem is we only have a certain number of notes that we can show on the staff, and because of that, we need to find a way to produce or show us more notes, thus giving us ledger lines. So ledger lines are given to us to help us extend the staff above and below the staff. We've talked here about middle C because middle C is right in the middle of the piano and in the staff. And then here we're going to look at ledger lines that we've talked about before in the treble and bass clef. So we know that this top line is F, the next space is G, and then the first ledger line above the treble clef is A, continuing up B, 2 is C. So using the same pattern, A, B, C, D, E, F, G of our musical ABCs is how we're going to use and find what these note names are in our ledger lines. Same thing applies for our bass clef. We know that bottom line is not shown there, but the bottom line is G. And then going down our musical alphabet, down the staff, F. 1 ledger line below is E. 1 ledger line below on the next space is D. And then 2 lines below is C. So remember, if the line is going through the note, it is a line note on ledger lines. And if the line is above or below the note, that's going to give us a space note. So that same pattern of line, space, line, space, line, space, line still applies to ledger lines as well. All right, guys, we've reached the end of our lesson today. Before we go, I'm going to show you an example of a full piece of music that looks just like this. This is I Love a Piano by Irving Berlin. And we can see all of those different elements of our grand staff. We have ledger lines all over the place, all sorts of things. And this is a score written for the piano. So once you learn your ledger lines and review and understand how you continue to read your notes and spaces quickly, that helps you to learn how to play instruments such as the piano. So it is always important to review your lines and spaces, just as it is important to review things in your math world, like your fast facts. You know what? I'm going to put a couple fast facts right here on the screen, and we're going to see just how quick you can be with them. All right, so afterwards, we're going to do a quick fast fact check. Now, that's right, you got that answer right. So now that you've reviewed that fast fact, practice your lines and spaces, practice your ledger lines, practice your math fast facts, and here's a little clip of this piece, I Love a Piano by Irving Berlin. Thanks so much for coming, thanks so much for watching, and I'm so glad you joined us today. Have a wonderful day, be musical, be awesome. Bye-bye now. Haha, you thought I was done, but I'm not yet. Because I know in the video before I mentioned that our fun fact was pianos have 88 keys. And yes, that is true. However, there is a piano company called Bosendorfer who has made what's called the Imperial 290, which has extra keys. Let's take a look at this short clip of what those extra keys sound like.
Work my way down all the way to C0 and just let you listen to how they sound. So here's C0, here's B, here is B flat, and here is A. We're about to leave the realm of normal pianos. Here is A flat 0. Here is G0. Here is F sharp. Here is F. Here is E. Here is E flat. Here is D. is C0. So as you can tell, especially when you get down to the very, very lowest 3 or 4 notes, they almost stop sounding like notes, and they just become a crazy noise that is absolutely incredible. And that's about all there is to say. They sound absolutely crazy.
All right, so I'm back. You heard those super crazy notes on the lowest end of the Bosendorfer Imperial 290. Here's a clip of what they look like. And before we go, for real this time, this piano was created because there were some composers that wanted extra low notes in their compositions, and the original piano with 88 keys just couldn't produce it. So Bosendorfer decided, we're going to make this piano for you so you can do those things. And to be completely honest, when I went to college at Winthrop, we had a Bosendorfer like this one on the stage. It had a couple extra notes, and the power and sound was so incredible. So incredible. All right, we're really done now. We're completely done. We're all done. I'm leaving. You're leaving. You guys are great musicians. Thank you so much for coming. Bye bye now. For real.